What's the craziest crime you or somebody in your family has committed? My grandfather's father was a mean, abusive, hateful drunk who would come home from working in the mines long enough to terrorize his children and impregnate his wife and then leave again for mine work. He tried to set the house on fire, with wife and kids, 13 of them, inside, twice. One day my grandfather and a couple of his siblings were picking berries across the road from the house and his drunk father started taking potshots at them with a rifle. My grandpa, one brother, and his oldest sister took off running for the house with the agreement that the first one there would kill him, their father. My grandpa's sister got there first and shot him to death. She was never charged with a crime, due to her age and the fact that everyone knew my great grandfather was a mean son of a bitch and had it coming. Eater. Wow. My most upvoted comment is about my family's ducked up history lol. Edit number 2. Thank you all so much for the awards. Also, RIP inbox lol. Edit number 3. Since some of y'all think it's fake, here's some proof. My friend got blackout drunk and stole a bulldozer that had the keys left in it. He turned it on and obviously didn't know how to drive it, so he just ended up making the scoopy part go up and down for a bit before the cops came. They actually let him go too. It's not a bad crime or anything, but it was illegal at the time. So, in Germany, up until a few years ago, we still had a general draft for the army, and a generation ago it was very hard to get out of it. My uncle was a hardcore pacifist, so going to the army wasn't an option for him. But being accepted as a conscientious objector at that time basically required you to be a devout Christian and use the Bible as an argument for why you couldn't kill another human. And my uncle was also atheist. He couldn't realistically object, didn't want to go to the army and didn't want to go to jail, too. So he waited. He got sent his draft notice, passed the physical and got a letter telling him to report to X company under Sergeant Y. He wrote back a reply, on rose-colored paper, scented with perfume, about how much he was looking forward to serving under the strong leadership of Y, promising to obey every one of his orders, and that he can't wait to experience life in the barracks together with so many strong and muscular men. He was declared unfit for service shortly after. Cousin got busted robbing a bank, got sentenced to jail, proceeded to break out of jail with his cellmate and went on the run. Fast forward a few months and he's living in a hotel room with his cellmate. Cellmate orders a pizza to the room. Bad idea. Delivery guy recognized them and reported them to the police. They get arrested again and shortly after my cousin killed himself in prison. My cousin had a wife and a kid and got into a nasty coke habit. We don't bring him up anymore. My dad, when he was much younger and infinitely more stupid, regularly used to drink drive with his friends. It was the early 70s, and no one really cared. To hear him speak about it now, he can't believe how stupid he was. One night, he and his friend were out drinking. They heard there was a party going on at a pub across town and decided to head over. On the way they go past a large club with a queue of people waiting to go in. My dad decides to show off a bit and pull a skid. He miscalculated, hit a curb and flipped the car, sliding down the road on his roof. The car stops. They get out and leg it, to the cheers of the people in the queue. They get the bus back home and immediately call the police to report the car is stolen. The police knew what had happened, but couldn't prove anything. My grandfather's cousin stabbed a waiter to death because he wouldn't let him use the employees only restroom in his restaurant. My dad brought in a banana tree to the US from his home village in Kerala. He literally walked through customs with a tree in a pot in his arms. The customs lady asked him what he was thinking and he just replied that the banana tree was from his mother's garden. The customs lady must have thought my dad was crazy, but she just let him walk right through. We still have that tree and its offspring. My aunt had a boyfriend, let's call him Mike, cause that was his name. He was always the life of the party. Everyone loved him, always holding my aunt from behind and kissing her neck. A little too much PDA, but hey, they were happy. Turns out Mike was abusive. Like, very abusive. Physically and mentally. The neck kissing was him whispering in her ear, berating my aunt for making a fool of herself dancing. My grandfather found out about the abuse, went over to Mike's place, knocked on the door. When Mike answered, My grandfather put a gun to his head and said, if I find out you ever touch my daughter again, I'll ducking kill you. Welp. A few weeks later my aunt shows up with a black eye and a sling. Mike. He was found dead on the roof of his apartment building the following weekend. We all have zero doubt it was my grandfather's doing. As a successful lawyer I am sure he had connections who could help. Edit. My grandfather never mentioned it. He simply said oh what a shame when he found out. Never admitted to anything, but as far as I'm aware there was not enough crime scene evidence found to charge anyone with a crime. My husband's dad killed the guy who his then girlfriend was cheating on him with. He was supposed to serve a life term but got out because of a clerical error. He did manual labor on a local park and apparently the guys who helped were supposed to get a reduced sentence. However, he was not supposed to. I think my husband talked about it once. Also, my husband's half-brother, same murderous dad, killed his business partner. He would have gotten away with it, however. He moved the body when he found out construction was going to start in that spot. And what were they going to build there? Prison. He's currently serving a life sentence. My husband has never met his half-brother. He also has 2 half-sisters from the same dad who are law-abiding citizens. An uncle robbed a bank, or was an accessory to the robbers. IDK. His brilliant escape when the police showed up was to go to the roof and jump off. He didn't do time. Just had to go to the hospital for a broken leg. I'll have to ask my mom when I get a chance. She knows the story better than I do. My uncle sold Tim Allen the sugar that got him sent to prison in the late 70s. Not really a crime, as in not necessarily illegal, but my grandfather had 2 separate families in 2 different cities. Named both of his firstborn sons after himself. And they both named sons after themselves too, including me. So I share my name with my father and grandfather, as well as a half uncle and at least 1 cousin. I worked at a movie theater when Back to the Future was originally released. We used to take the entire movie ticket instead of tearing them and resell them to the next group coming in. The old theater was massive. Sat 600 people. We probably made about $15k between 2 of us in month or so. Adjusted for inflation, it's about $37k. We were the richest high school kids in our town. My dad told me he once snuck into a tire warehouse. He cut the alarm and came in through a window on the roof and stole a bunch of tires. My granddad accidentally shot his brother in the ass. He meant to shoot something out of his hand, but missed. Drunk. Genius. Hillbilly it. Thankfully my dad married well, and I turned out alright. My cousin was the bread father, a goat lady. She had purchased goat meat from a farm. The farm was supposed to raise the goat, butcher it, and let her pick up the meat. When she arrived, the goat was still alive and had been painted with Vikings colors and bread father's jersey number. The farmer didn't want to butcher it because his kids were around. Her older brother is an outdoorsman hunter type, so he told her to bring it to his house and he would butcher it for her. They had car trouble on the way. Pulled into a mechanic to have the car fixed. The mechanic opened the trunk, saw the goat, and called the police. Edit. Stuck this in a reply, but since people keep asking, here is a picture of the goat. Also, thanks for the awards. My dad's cousin erased all family member names from a property deed except for his father's. The paperwork had been water damaged, so there was no easy way to tell what should have been there. Family law says that he also paid off some local politicians' office workers to make the new deed stand. Got stoned, drunk and rode an electric scooter with a friend, only to end up in front of a huge fence with barbed wire I decided to climb. Huge mistake, it was a military base. I ran out of there at speed light when I realized. Fortunately I escaped. Not sure if it should be considered a crime, but one of my great aunts was in an abusive marriage with a war vet who took to beating her and forcing her to play Russian roulette when he drank. One night she managed to rig the gun so when he took his turn he blew his brains out. She wasn't charged. My uncle was a small drug lord in Northern California in the 90s. He had a compound out in Gold Country. Had to drive through 3 gates with guards to get to his house. I never questioned it as a kid. Just enjoyed heading up so I could fish in the stocked base pond, which also had snapping turtles, as a line of defense. He'd take me out shopping at the mall with a film canister full of coke that he'd take hits off of occasionally, shadowed by some bodyguards. One time we were out for a ride in his Corvette going well over 100 and got tagged by highway patrol. He talked his way out of a ticket, told the officer he was showing off for his nephew and got carried away. The officer thought it was hilarious and told me it was lucky since he had a ton of illegal guns and drugs in the trunk and would have made a run for it. He got arrested when I was 15. It was a full-blown. Feds descended upon the compound in helicopters and swung through the windows with flashbangs. The whole nine. He was arrested, and since if he snitched on anyone above him he was, very bluntly, a dead man. He took the rap, was extradited to Lee in VA to serve a bit over 10 years. All he asked for while he was there was protein powder. He got prison ripped, and apparently beat someone near to death with a sock full of quarters for cutting in front of him at the payphone. At some point in my life all 4 of my uncles on both sides, plus my dad, have spent time in prison for drug-related offenses. But this particular uncle takes the cake. One time my uncle put ranch dressing on a dry-aged NY strip steak that cost $70. My grandfather was often drunk, but when he wasn't drunk he would pretend to be drunk so that the Soviet Communist Party members responsible for interrogating all those who might be opposed to communism thought and said, "Hey, he's a drunk. We'll question him last." This gave him time to gather resources so he could escape with my dad. So, although public inebriation probably almost certainly wasn't a crime in most Eastern European countries at the time, late 40s, he would have been gulag bound if he'd been caught in this charade. My grandpa wouldn't obey the train warnings. He would try and beat the train rather than wait. First time he got hit in his new convertible on the way to prom with my grandma. Had barely started on the payments and car was totaled. Luckily they were both okay. Second time was a little less reckless but still dumb. He was driving a semi and it broke down on the tracks. He kept trying to get the tractor trailer to start, rather than lose his rig and load. Semi got hit by the train. Total loss and ducked up his back. I browse Reddit through the Chrome browser, on mobile. In college we got a new printer and printed off a bunch of fairly convincing $20 bills. Roughed them up and used them at a bunch of fast food restaurants. Didn't realize how dumb it was until years later. I ran for president of the United States and won. He's dead now, but years ago my relative got in a bar fight and lost, so he went to his vehicle to get his rifle. Fortunately the police arrested him on the way into the bar, so his charges were a lot less. Still did jail time. My father, when I was still very young, used a fake name and pretended to be a wedding planner for a young couple. That young couple hired him, since he seemed trustworthy and is an excellent liar, giving him access to their savings for wedding supplies and such that would be needed. Instead, he stole all of the money out of their account and then ran away with it. As far as I am aware, he was never caught and the money was never returned to them. The worst part is that the poor couple never even got their wedding and had almost nothing left afterwards. I downloaded the movie Pootie Tang from the Bay. My uncle stole one of those oil candles from our table at a Hard Rock cafe once. When we got outside he pulled it from his jacket with it still lit. A member of my family once took part in an armed insurrection against the United States. He even led an army that was part of that insurrection. The state of Virginia just removed his statue from the US Capitol building. My cousin was affiliated with a 1% MC. He was not a patched member but would do jobs for them. He got arrested for beating someone with a baseball bat who allegedly had gambling debt with the MC. He did 3 years and was on parole for a few years after that. He's still a shady character and I wouldn't be surprised if he was still doing dumb it. Edit. MC equals motorcycle club. A 1% motorcycle club is the 1% of MC who are involved in organized crime. My mom set a dude on fire. When I was young I had a babysitter named Chris. He was the uncle of my 2 best friends, sisters Abby and Becca. He was also abusive. He liked to do things to me in front of them, make them listen to my cry and scream. Nothing physical, I should mention. More psychological. Anyway, I didn't tell anyone about it, and in fact only learned this story about 2 years ago. But it turns out that my best friends did. They told my mom and she was pissed. Soon after that there's a party at my friend's parents' house. My mom goes and sees Chris. He's all nice to her. They're outside in the backyard. She starts kinda joking around, roughhousing, messing with him. She grabs some lighter fluid and sprays some on him. Hahaha, just a joke. She lights a match. Ha, you wouldn't do it, would you? And she lights him on fire. According to my mom, he was put out quickly so he was fine. But she told him that's what it's like when you're scared for your life. And then she left. Apparently he flew back to Florida the next day. My father committed one of the first computer crimes in the 90s. A ton of files were corrupted due to a code he created because they fired him. FBI invaded our home and arrested him. Was sent to federal prison for 4 years. Which was interesting because there was never a crime committed of its nature before. They made a forensics file episode about it. Edit, if anyone is curious. The company was Omega. My dad got into a bar fight around 21 or so. Hit a guy so hard he killed him. He went to prison of course, but while working along the road he stopped another prisoner that attacked a guard and tried to escape. My dad was released for that. He never drank after that, and if he got angry he just walked out of the house to cool off. He turned 81 a week ago and he's the nicest, easiest going guy you would ever meet. He never judges anyone. He once said to me, "We all make mistakes." For the record, I only heard the story about tennis ago from my brother. He told him during a road trip. He lived in a small town and I have no idea what prison he was at or the official reason he was released, but considering it was probably around OSI 61 OSI 62, they probably used whatever reason they wanted to for his release. Edit, thanks for the award. Wasn't necessary but thanks. Uncle Jeff ate a few guys in Milwaukee. Twin brothers boosted a car and robbed a 711 like 1/2 mile from house. Ditched car 10 houses from theirs. How were they caught? Officers respond to alarm triggered by Clark. Officer, got an alarm here, what happened? Clark, Tim and Tom came in and robbed the store. Officer, how do you know it was these guys? Clark, they are 6 feet 4 inches twins who come in every day. I know their shape and voice. The car. 911 operator. 911, what is your emergency? Neighbor, was watching TV and 2 guys park a car in front of my house. One guy got out with like a Windex bottle and cleaned all the door handles and door areas. Then opened door and the other guy took the stuff and cleaned the inside areas. Then they ran off up the street. Dispatch, can you describe the 2 individuals? Neighbor, well it was Tim and Tom, the twins that live up the street from me. They're like 6 feet 4 inches and they are twins. As a 10-year-old I violated section 508 of the Communications Act of 1934, received underhanded assistance in a purportedly bona fide contest of intellectual knowledge or intellectual skill. Basically, got manipulated into being on a rigged kids game show, which was cancelled days before it was supposed to air on Fox because someone spilled the beans. I didn't realize until years later what was actually going on. Edit, this kind of turned into an impromptu AMA, so check the replies if you're curious to hear what happened. I was offered a glass of 25 years aged old par and I mixed it with some Pepsi. The look of horror on my buddies' faces is still engraved in my memory more than 20 years later. I stepped on my dog's foot once accidentally and boy do I regret it. My uncle started a fight in his regular pub in his 20s after they tried to charge him an extra 10p for his usual lager and lime. 10p for the lime. He kicked it out of the bartender, broke a police officer's nose, and it took 8 of them to bring him down in the end, I believe. He still boasts to this day about how he came out of prison with more criminal knowledge than he went in with, and how he used to make metal hooks for the other prisoners which they'd use to scale the fences to try and escape. He thinks it makes him sound cool and edgy, but he's such a d-head. Can't stand him. I once snuck a camera in a movie theater and made a camera recording of a movie that I uploaded to the internet. Great uncle was forced to flee Italy after protesting Mussolini or something like that. When he was a teenager, my dad robbed a mother's cookies truck. Cookies for months. Damn, the FBI is on fire today. My wife's cousin was arrested for the manufacturing of meth 3 times and was sentenced to life. His mom and dad all cooked meth and supplied basically the entire area. The worst part is that during his last arrest he was taking the fall for his parents. They were in large part why our small sleazy little trash heap of a town was one of the top 5 for meth in the United States at the time. I regularly pay for six and have a coke addiction, neither of which are heavily enforced as long as I play it safe. When I was a dumb 6th grader, my best friend was a hardcore vegetarian. A McDonald's was going up practically in the backyard of her fam's condo. We snuck out and spray painted things like meat equals death on it, keeping in mind that I was a happy omnivore lol. But then we pulled up these rocks the size of our heads and threw them at 2 huge 7 to 8 feet windows. Think of the windows on the front of Mercedes that let you see the entire inside. Took a couple attempts to get them to shatter. We snuck out a lot. There was one time around age 15 when we applied heavy makeup, wore our slag clothes, and got into a frat party. She lived walking distance to campus and smoked pot for the first time. My cousin's husband got caught on a predator chaser's live stream trying to kidnap a 14-year-old boy. Last year my psychotic mother burned down my childhood home. That her, my dad, my niece, my sibling, and sibling's partner lived in because she believed my dad was cheating on her. Despite no evidence, and this was not the first time she accused my dad of cheating with no evidence. Effectively, she destroyed everything we had built and kept in that home, along with my dad's dog and my sister's cat. Cat was burned up, so never found, but the dog died of asphyxiation in my niece's room under her bed. Then after the fire, in what I can only construe as an act of desperation, she went to my bank and stole all of the money out of my accounts because she was secondary on the accounts. I was working on changing banks, but my new bank had yet to finalize the creation of my new account. Moral of the story is take your parents off your bank accounts when you turn 18. She's now serving time in a county jail for the arson because she took a plea deal and got a reduced sentence, which I still believe was utter crap. She played the poor old lady act to the judge and he took pity on her that she did not deserve. This is the woman who eviscerated my self-esteem and made my life hell ever since I was born. She was toxic and abusive, never told me the truth about anything, and is a greedy, manipulative person. I feel no shame in saying that I do not care about her. She's lost any right to my love and respect. My sister shoplifts uncontrollably. She shoplifts everything everywhere she goes. Her daughter just turned 1 and she has stolen every bit of formula her daughter ever used. It's insane she's never been caught. My brother got completely inebriated one night and stupidly drove home. He woke up early in the morning to the sound of a baby crying. He looked around and noticed he didn't recognize the house. He quickly got up and walked outside to his car halfway in the driveway street and still running. Got in his car and drove away as quickly as he could. Turns out it was some random house about 5-10 minutes away from our actual house. He never knew whose house it was and never got caught. He also slowed down his drinking after that.